In this video, I'm going to tell you the top 5 altcoins you can use to make money today to acquire more Bitcoin. As the bull market is beginning to pick up and altcoins continue to pick up steam, a lot of people are coming to me asking which alts I'm buying, and when I'm selling in order to maximize as many Bitcoin profits as possible. Now, let's look at some charts and see which altcoins out there are going to make us the most profit in Bitcoin as soon as possible. Let's take a look. This right here is one of the altcoins here. This is Ethereum. This is one of the biggest cryptocurrencies in the world. It's the largest proof of stake consensus model in the world. It is up today 7% in terms of Bitcoin. So if you bought Ethereum yesterday and now you're selling for Bitcoin today, you've made 7% profit. Good for you. That's wonderful. You have stacked more sats by trading altcoins. Now, if we go look at this chart, this is a massive momentum shift upwards. If we go up to the week, though, it's not quite as impressive because there was a decline earlier in the week. And if we go back out to the last 6 months, we see that actually this has been a slow bleed down for Ethereum, and this massive 7% pump today has only been this little blip at the back here. So if we go out a whole year, we can see it's also down about 26%. Now, over the last 5 years, it has roughly doubled. It has roughly doubled its value against Bitcoin. If we go out against all time, though, we see that according to its highs, it's only about half of what it was in the peak of 2017. So that's kind of a concern. If it's been over 5 years and Ethereum is down over half of its peak, despite all the innovation, despite the 10x increase in attention, media, and news press, and innovation occurring, this isn't really performing that well against Bitcoin. You had a whole bull market here with price suppression of Bitcoin from FTX, by the way, and it didn't make a new all-time high. In fact, it's still struggling here. Okay, well, that's all right. We can go to a different altcoin here. We can look at Shiba Inu. Okay, Shiba Inu is a popular one. I actually was asked about this multiple times today at my work at the Bitcoin Advisor. In case you don't know, I work at the Bitcoin Advisor where I help people take self-custody of their Bitcoin and store it properly. If you're not done that, and you got your stuff in Coinbase or Binance or whatever, you should seriously consider getting it out. But the point is that at my job here, people ask me about these altcoins too. And Sheba is one of those altcoins along with Ethereum, like I just talked about. Now, if we look at the last day here, Sheba is up quite a bit in terms of Bitcoin. In fact, it's up, let's see, well, actually, no, not up quite as much as I thought. If we go back out to 7 days, though, it might be up. Yeah, it's up a little bit in the last 7 days. But if we go the farther and farther out we go, the longer our time horizon, the more that Sheba trends down against Bitcoin indefinitely. So now, if you bought it over here when it was really cheap, you would have made a lot of money instantly. But the problem is inherently the majority of people buy after this and not before this. So it's incredibly difficult to buy an altcoin and trade profitably for Bitcoin, especially if you've already heard of it. Now, why does this happen fundamentally? Well, it happens the same reason that the S&P 500 goes down. See, the S&P 500 are the top 500 largest companies in the US here, at least publicly traded. And this is the S&P 500 in terms of Bitcoin. The blue line here on the logarithmic scale is Bitcoin's price in terms of US dollars. The green line here is the S&P 500 in Bitcoin's price. It looks like it's also logarithmic scale. And then this red line here is a logarithmic comparison between the two, pricing the S&P 500 in terms of Bitcoin. So in the same way, this is Ethereum in terms of Bitcoin, this chart we were looking at before. Notice how it is trending down against Bitcoin. It's gone down 50% in the last 5 years. If you go to Sheba, it has gone down even more in percentage terms in an even shorter period of time. And if we look at the S&P 500, it has also gone down greatly, continually over time, making lower lows and lower highs. Okay. Now, if we look at some other altcoins out there, these are altcoins you're probably much more familiar with, and you actually probably own these. Okay. No, I'm not talking about the S&P 500 here. I'm not talking about ETH. I'm not talking about Binance's token or anything like that. If we look at the dollar here in terms of Bitcoin, you can see that it also trends down perpetually against Bitcoin. In the last 5 years, the US dollar has fallen 92% against Bitcoin. We could also look at the euro. It has also fallen 93% against Bitcoin. Okay. China's political currency unit has also fallen down 93% against Bitcoin. And likewise, Japan's currency has fallen way, way more, although we're looking beyond 5 years here. But the point is that no matter the asset, all of these assets from these political currencies with these massive countries, with massive militaries, and forcing people to use their currencies, literally with the force of a gun and the threat of taxation, these currencies are trending down against tiny little Bitcoin, powering away with block by block, minute or 10 minutes after 10 minutes, every 10 minutes, a new block. and it's still going up in value perpetually against these things. Okay, the S&P 500. This is going long America's corporate sector, and yet even if you did that, it is trending down against Bitcoin. If we pick gold, for example, perhaps oftentimes the analog comparison people use to describe Bitcoin. If we look at gold, it is falling down in terms of Bitcoin. Even though gold recently made an all-time high, gold is trending down against Bitcoin. Okay, now if we look at another asset here, we can look at U.S. rent. U.S. rent is coming down, and this is a good reminder to say that this is not a bad thing. Okay, the prices of all these things coming down is not a bad thing. We tend to think they're a bad thing because we're pricing the world in terms of a volatile currency that with a volatile supply. Again, but it's not in value, but in terms of the number of currency units. It's a volatile currency supply. The U.S. dollar, the altcoin of the U.S. government, that is a volatile currency. And if we're pricing the world in terms of that, prices coming down seems like a bad thing, but in reality, it is that everything's crashing, but including the things you want to crash, like rent, like energy, like food, like oil. Don't you want your gas prices to go down to the right forever? Well, they can if you use Bitcoin. Don't you want your food that you buy? Don't you want your grocery bills to go down perpetually over time? Well, they can if you use Bitcoin. If you use the Japanese currency, that is not going to happen. If you use the Chinese currency, that's not going to happen. If you use Ethereum, that's not going to happen. And if you use Sheba, that's not going to happen. So my point being that, at my role at the Bitcoin Advisor, people have really taken a liking to it. And I know it might be hard for some people to believe, but this really is occurring. People out there all the time. Just today, I talked to multiple people, quote unquote, out of the ledge of considering going all in on various digital unregistered security cryptocurrency things, because their perspective is, I want as much Bitcoin as I can. I want to get to 1 Bitcoin as fast as possible. And in order to do that, I got to trade these altcoins as much as possible as the market starts to ramp up so that I can lock in my 1 Bitcoin before the government begins to censor Bitcoin and begin to limit people from buying Bitcoin. And my answer to that always, always, always is, if the government can shut it down, they will shut it down. If you're buying Bitcoin because you believe that the government has a threat against coming after your Bitcoin and you want to get as much Bitcoin as possible before that occurs, okay, if you own an altcoin and you have it sitting on an exchange, the government will confiscate it. If it's an unregistered security, they will shut it down. Okay, CZ of Binance, okay, one of the richest people in all of crypto, okay, billions and billions of dollars. The government got him, okay? Now, granted, he paid his fines and he's going to, walk free and continue to, go about, and even SBF of FTX in many cases has had his controversy with evading the law long enough. So obviously, if they buy the lobbyists, they can get by for a while. But eventually, if the government views it as a threat, they will shut it down. And if they don't view it as a threat, they will incorporate it. Why do you think that governments are pro some of these proof of stake models? Why do you think the World Economic Forum is pro proof of stake models and not proof of work models? Okay, it's because they will ban the things that they can ban that they do view a threat. They will not ban the things that they can ban, but they like the benefits of them. And the things that they can't ban that are also a threat, they will simply distract. Okay, the government's best way to help limit Bitcoin's adoption is not to shut it down, is to distract, okay? If we are looking at the advent of gunpowder, let's say, and you are a country that doesn't have gunpowder and another country does have gunpowder, the stupidest possible thing you could do is to directly come after that enemy with guns and with violence and try to confiscate their wealth, because now you're only incentivizing a faster adoption of gunpowder. The best thing you could possibly do if you are the emperor of the nation that doesn't have gunpowder is to distract them, okay? And that's what these altcoins are. They are distractions. In many cases, I think the government allows this distraction because they understand the threat of Bitcoin, and they want you to speculate in these altcoins, to believe the lie that it's extremely easy to get rich quicker in these altcoins and to then take profits on them and do Bitcoin, okay? Because keep in mind, a huge percentage of the people like you that are in these altcoins also, like you, are in it for a trade. And it's worthy keeping in mind here that it's very possible that within 30, 40, 50 days, we could be looking at a Bitcoin ETF. Okay, this whole idea that altcoins will outperform Bitcoin, I do think that narrative will eventually die. Maybe it doesn't die this cycle. Maybe it doesn't even die next cycle, but I think it's going to die. And I think the probability for that narrative going away perhaps could be closer than we think. Okay, if we have a major credit event coming up where prices everywhere crash, okay, wouldn't you rather own Bitcoin than your little altcoins trying to make more Bitcoin? Like, don't you think in a mega crash that Bitcoin's going to crash less than your little tiny token that nobody cares about? Don't you think that? Okay, don't you think that Michael Saylor is going to buy another $1 billion of Bitcoin if that occurs? Okay, he's not buying a Sheba. Okay, he's not buying Ethereum. He's not buying Binance token. Okay, he's not buying Solana. He's not buying Cardano. He's not buying these things. Okay, the Michael Saylors of the world, the millionaires of the world, okay, the financial advisors that are about to shill people these Bitcoin ETFs and encourage these millionaires to take a 1, 2, or 5% allocation of Bitcoin, they're going to be telling them to buy Bitcoin. They're not going to be telling them to buy Engine. They're not going to be telling them to buy, what's another one, Mana token or all these other things or Polygon. They're not going to be telling them to buy that. They're going to be telling them to buy Bitcoin. So yeah, you might think that these altcoins might outperform and do really well. And maybe that occurs for some coins this cycle, but the reality is that one Michael Saylor level buy is 10,000 people like you throwing a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 into some random altcoin. Keep that in mind. That every billionaire that follows Michael Saylor's lead, every ETF that gets approved, every financial advisor that begins telling their clients to take a 2% allocation for these boomers, okay, every single one of those is an order of magnitude, a huger and more massive capital inflow into Bitcoin. That is a supply that is actually draining. Most of these altcoins we've talked about have supplies that are increasing. Bitcoin supply on exchanges is decreasing. And so if you are trying to buy Bitcoin and you're looking for some altcoins that could potentially be profitable to you, I have a couple of suggestions. The first suggestion I would have could be gold by chance. If you're looking for an altcoin that's going to die the least or the slowest against Bitcoin, it could be gold. That could be a good option for you. Another potential good option for you could be the NASDAQ, or another one could be the S&P 500. Or if you want something that's a little more liquid, that perhaps is a little less volatile in terms of your political currency of choice, then obviously you should pick the US political currency because there is no second best political currency. This is the best fiat political currency in the world. However, even that is vastly inferior to Bitcoin since it has lost 9/10 of its value against Bitcoin in the last 5 years alone. So my encouragement, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. If you want to buy altcoins to get a profit on them, go for it. But the reality is that as tempting as it is, I do not think it's worth it. The downside possibility for Bitcoin is far, far, far less than for these altcoins. And the upside inevitability eventually in a long enough time horizon is far, far, far greater for Bitcoin than for these altcoins. So please don't buy the narrative. Don't be in the nation with gunpowder and be distracted by your foreign enemy's distraction somewhere else. Understand how important and precious and strategic it is that you get as much Bitcoin as you can. Yes, those alts that you may sell today for Bitcoin might go up in value against Bitcoin in the future, but please, please, please consider all the risks you're dealing with here. My strong, strong encouragement is that if you're going to buy altcoins, stick to the big ones. Stick to gold, stick to the dollar, stick to real estate, stick to the S&P 500. Don't go all the way out there on the proof of stake and the proof of whatever things out there that don't have the validity. Stick with the legit stuff if you're going to buy anything that's not Bitcoin. And if you are understanding Bitcoin and you do understand the significance of Bitcoin, strongly consider selling some of those assets for Bitcoin as soon as possible, because all those assets are trending down against Bitcoin indefinitely. And I think that's just going to continue to be the case. Okay. Your goal should not be to make as much Bitcoin in the most stressful way possible. Okay. Your goal should be get everything you possibly can today, because there are 1.77 million Bitcoins left on exchanges. There are 60 million millionaires in the world. If just 1 in 30 of those millionaires has their financial advisor encourage them to buy 1 Bitcoin, they're all gone. So if you're trading altcoins because someday you want to get to 1 Bitcoin, or someday you want to get to 10 Bitcoin, or someday you want to get to whatever stacking goal you have, I think genuinely the fastest way you're going to get there is to sell your altcoins, sell your other assets, sell your dollars, sell your Ethereum, sell your whatever, and buy Bitcoin. As Michael Saylor says, take all your money, buy Bitcoin, take all your time, figure out ways to borrow more money to buy more Bitcoin, and then figure out what else you can sell to buy Bitcoin. And so if you have those altcoins, I'd strongly consider you sell to buy Bitcoin.